I definitely think content is becoming more authentic. And I feel like it's because people are becoming more comfortable being on social. Putting yourself out there online in that way has become so normal that it almost requires a level of being yourself, being authentic, because it's so easy to debunk whether you're being inauthentic or not. People can sense it. And I think because of that, we're just getting to a place where we see content and it feels a lot more organic. It feels a lot more natural.
Welcome back. We are excited to bring you the last episode of June. I cannot believe how quickly this summer is flying by, just getting to the halfway mark of the year. And there's going to be lots of interesting information that we're going to have. We're fielding a study right now about the rest of this year and what's on women's minds. So stay tuned for an upcoming episode where we will be sharing the results of that. Today, we have another great guest for you. We have a influencer creator, Jayde Powell. Jayde has been in this industry for a while. She actually started on the management side of the house, working with creators and influencers, but then switched over to being a creator herself. She now runs a very popular series called Creator Tea Talk, where she talks about a lot of different topics, including some of the cultural changes that are affecting the creator industry, as well as some of the most pressing challenges and opportunities within the industry right now. So we are excited to have Jayde on the show. She is not only a creator herself, but she is also an entrepreneur. She is a founder of the M Company. She talks more with me about that in this episode. I think you are going to enjoy this one. With that, we're going to jump right into it. Here we go. Jayde, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so looking forward to talking with you because I looked at a lot of your content. You are active on the traditional social platforms like Instagram and TikTok, but you're also active on LinkedIn. And I want to talk about that. So we're going to get into all of it. But I want to start with just first, how did you get involved in becoming a creator yourself?
Yeah, it was funny because it actually came out of transition of me working in social media marketing for a long time. And I still technically do. So I now do both. I work as a marketer and a creator. But more specifically, a job that I had a couple of years ago, I was the head of social for a beverage brand, a women-led brand. That was kind of like my first introduction of working with creators and influencers directly. I had worked with them in kind of distant capacities in previous jobs, getting them to sign their contracts, making sure they had everything done logistically, briefing them. And that process of kind of working with them, especially seeing how they were getting paid to create things, which was very interesting to me. I was like, oh, I like this and I kind of want to do it. So I think some time into that role, I realized that I wanted to focus less on social media management and more so the content and creative production of social media. And that's what introduced me to be a content creator, more formally, I guess, because I technically have been creating on platforms for so long, but I feel like content creation has kind of changed these past couple of years and what that looks like. So it just kind of transitioned me into creating my own content online and having things that were a little bit more ownable across my channels.
So what has changed in your estimation in terms of the content creation? On the one hand, just as someone who's kind of observing it, I think the tools have gotten so much better for creating content. It's a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
I think of the creators from 15 plus years ago and how hard it was to create a piece of content. Now it's so much easier, and AI is helping people create content. So can you talk a little bit about how content creation has changed, and then also how AI is in that process?
So it's interesting because I feel like the social media platforms have changed in a way that almost leads towards creator focused content and not just traditional brand content. So of course, you can post your photos and your graphics on social, but even the rise of short form video has completely kind of monopolize the way that people view what content looks like. Even when we say the words content creator, I think people immediately think short form video like on TikTok or Instagram, even though that definition is a little bit more holistic. But the platforms like TikTok and Instagram, especially, they have created a space for creators to kind of like share their own message in the way that they want to and be the brands themselves rather than, the more traditional brand that's like been around for years. And they're embedding those features into their platforms directly, making sure that people can, edit videos rather than using an external editing tool if they don't want to, having like green screen features, sound effects, all the things that people would need to be a video editor, essentially. And then what we see AI being incorporated is on the platforms as well. Even as a content creator who thinks, again, holistically, not just doing short form video, but also even writing, I see it in tools like Canva, which is one of my favorite tools to use. Every time I design a graphic for a brand, I can use AI tools within Canva to like either make my job easier or just simplify things in a way that I wasn't thinking before. Or even Grammarly is using AI to make sure I'm copy editing right. Like whatever that looks like, AI just makes things a lot more simple. And one of my favorite ways to use it is like I use ChatGPT as a brainstorming tool. So I'm like, ChatGPT, I need ideas for this. And it will pump out like 50 ideas. And then I use like my brain to kind of refine, tweak in a more human way. So I love it. It's like a brainstorm buddy that I otherwise wouldn't have.
Well, so artificial intelligence is going to continue to have an impact on the creator space. Mm-hmm. So in addition to being a creator yourself, which you have brands you work with there, I would love if you could talk a little bit about the other businesses. So you have two businesses besides being a creator that you have built. One is the social media management company, an agency, basically. And then another is a weed company. So can you talk about what prompted you to do both these things? And, I feel like it can be hard enough to manage one business. I don't know how you manage plus doing content creation with which you earn income. So, I mean, I'm just so inspired by all of that you're doing. What inspired you to create these companies?
Honestly, I'm going to say a cheesy answer. And it was the fulfillment of my own joy. I just really want to do things that I enjoy working on. And I think coming out of corporate America, I was just kind of like, I think I really need to redefine what success looks like for me and set up a life for myself that actually makes sense for how I see myself living in 10 years and beyond. And as I was thinking about like entrepreneurship, because that was something that I always knew was a part of me. I started my first business when I was 18. And I think that was something that I was just kind of like, yeah, this makes sense. And
but you've had the entrepreneurial bug
for a while. Yes, definitely.
18-year-old start business. Yeah. That is not a usual thing. So, okay. So you've been in this headspace for a while of being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I've always known that I've wanted to create my own something. I just think when I was younger, it looked a lot different from what it does now. I think when I was younger, I had more of like a traditional mentality of, okay, I'm going to graduate high school, then I'm going to go to college, and then I'm going to get my first corporate job, and then I'm going to move up and make my way up to like CMO of whatever, and then I'm going to start my business. That is absolutely not where I am now, just because I've learned so much about what I actually want in my life. And starting my businesses was a part of that journey. I launched my agency because I realized, one, it was something I could do for myself. And then two, I wanted to have a lot more flexibility over my lifestyle. I wanted to be able to take on projects when I wanted to and when I didn't. And then I also wanted to work on the projects that I wanted to work on and the clients that I wanted to work with. And my agency really started because I realized within the social media marketing space, I didn't really want to be a social media manager anymore, but I did want to focus on creative strategy and content development. So that I wanted to hone in on. And then Weed for Black Women is interesting because it was actually the vision of my business partner, and she approached me to be her co-founder. So her and I, we actually met in the cannabis industry. We both worked in corporate cannabis several years ago in marketing, her on the brand side and me in social and digital. And we both left that company later came together because we kind of realized that within the industry, there was such a disparity between representation of Black women and Black people in this space, despite the fact that cannabis impacts people of color the most. And we came together and were like, we want to create a space where Black women feel very comfortable talking about their cannabis use and also celebrate it because it's not necessarily something that you have to be ashamed of. We know it's stigmatized and we know how the government looks at it. However, it's something that is literally changing lives. And, you know, cannabis doesn't always necessarily need to be talked about in the medical sense because it also can be used recreationally. It's like a glass of wine to people. Cannabis, especially CBD, is used for a lot of pain relief and a lot of women find it helpful for like sexual wellness, especially. So painful cramps, endometriosis, even just like pain that you may get from like literally having a uterus, which looks different for a lot of women or people who have uteruses. And then also, especially coming from like a medical cannabis background, we've seen it for people who just like who have MS, cancer, or a variety of like diseases or illnesses. And then from the recreational side, like people again like use cannabis in a way that's like a glass of wine. So it's literally for enjoyment as well. We always promote using cannabis responsibly and then also making sure that people who are new to it start low and go slow.
I want to talk a little bit about your Creator Tea Talk series. What was Creator Tea Talk and how did you decide to do this series?
Yeah. So Creator Tea Talk is a space I created on LinkedIn, which I like to call the briefcase app. And it is something I created because I wanted a space to come where marketers and influencers and creators could come together. And that came directly out of my experience working with creators and influencers. The creator economy is like such a new space. And I think what I've realized working in marketing on the brand side and then also working on a creator side, I have these like two viewpoints of what it's like to experience. And there's just like a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding of like what it actually means to be a creator and then what it means to be a marketer that hires creators. And I wanted to create a space where people can have transparent conversations around what that looks like. So one of the first episodes that we launched in season 1 was literally an episode around pay transparency because a lot of people in the creator economy know that it's a very much a wild, wild west. We don't know what standardized rates are. Everyone charges very differently. Marketers don't know how much budget they should be considering. Creators don't know how much we should be charging. So I got a whole bunch of creators and marketing professionals to literally get on the chat and talk about how much they were actually making and how much budget they were securing, which a lot of people found very helpful.
We obviously are in this space and work with both, we're kind of in the middle between like the brand side and the creator side. Our mission is to help make sure that female creator can earn income from what they have built. But we also have to make the budget work that we get from the brands that come to us. And you're right. It's like pricing for things are just kind of all over the place. There isn't an enormous amount of consistency. So what was the most surprising thing that you learned from that conversation or from that series of conversations where you're bringing the creators together, the brands together to talk about the pay transparency?
Honestly, that I should be charging more. I think that's like something that a lot of creators experience, including myself. It's like, a lot of us are very knowledgeable about how this space works, but because things aren't standardized, you just really don't have a full understanding of one, your possibilities, and then two, what your baseline should be. And I think it also has contributed to other conversations that I've had about Creator Tea Talk, especially in regards to pay equity, because we find that like women are oftentimes paid less, despite the fact that we are like the majority of the creator economy. And then especially people of color are paid less, and then Black women especially. And it's something that I realize the more I talk to other creators and marketers, we oftentimes don't realize how much we can be making until we talk to each other. So pay transparency, encouraging brands to really be transparency in the same way that they're transparent about salaries, be transparent about creator rates as well is so important to the health and growth of the creator economy.
So tell me a little bit about how you think about LinkedIn as one of the platforms that you operate on.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I always tell people this, like a couple of years ago, I started my presence mostly on Twitter. And I used to talk about how much I hated LinkedIn on Twitter all the time. I really disliked LinkedIn just because I did not like how people talked on the platform. It was just like very not human, almost robotic and almost like too corporate-y. And I was just like, I know that we're all like working professionals, but this is not actually how I talk in real life. So something it's like not translating here. And
Yeah.
almost this idea that like once you get on LinkedIn, you have to be a shell of who you are, which I find so odd. So once I decided to get on LinkedIn, it was mainly because there was kind of like a flight from Twitter when Elon kind of took over. And I was like, okay, it's not the same Twitter that we're used to. So I went over to LinkedIn and I was like, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to show up exactly the way I am in real life and how I am on other platforms. And
Mhm.
once I led with that, I found my community. So I was very intentional about being myself, speaking the way I do in real life. I'm going to curse. I'm going to crack my jokes. I'm going to say the things that probably make people uncomfortable. I don't really care because this is who I am and this is who they would be working with if they were to work with me.
I agree with you that LinkedIn is definitely becoming a lot less kind of structured in
Yeah.
terms of business language and jargon and a little bit more real. I will
Yes.
say that I'd love to hear your perspective on this because platforms kind of work differently. On
Mhm.
LinkedIn, for example, your followers can very actively in their feed, let's say,
Yeah.
see things that you're engaging with,
Yeah.
even if it's not someone who they follow. So, like,
Mhm.
I'll see in my feed so and so that you're connected to commented on this other post because we're trying to get you to kind of integrate with the other content.
Sure.
And that's different than the way like Instagram works. When I look at my feed on Instagram and I'm not seeing the
Me
people who
too.
I follow commenting on somebody else's post who I don't follow.
Mhm.
How do you see the platforms now in terms of which of the platforms do you think is and that you well, what do you prefer to which platform do you prefer to be on
Mhm.
of the platforms and why, and why is that the case? And then I'd love to kind of talk to you a little bit about some of the differences on the platform.
Yeah. So it definitely has changed depending on what context, well, what eras of my life you have talked to me in. Right now, LinkedIn is honestly my favorite platform. When I think of content, it's always LinkedIn first. And it's so weird to say that out loud. Because like,
Not, but I've seen, I'm sure they're happy to hear that. That's what they've
yeah,
been trying to do.
yeah, it's hilarious to me just because I was so anti LinkedIn at one point. And when I say it to other people, they're like LinkedIn out of all because they don't get it. It's almost like you have to be there to understand. But I think it's mainly because I have one chosen to show up in the way that I do on LinkedIn, but also I've been able to bring in this community that has been able to find me rather quickly. One of the things I really appreciate about LinkedIn in comparison to other platforms, both as a marketer and a creator, is its reach. Like compared to Instagram, I've been building on Instagram for years. I currently have twice the following that I do on Instagram in the past, and I've cultivated that in the past 2 years. And rather than the 8 years that I've been on Instagram. Like the reach
No.
is insane. And the beautiful thing about LinkedIn is I'm reaching the people that I would actually want to be networking with in real life. Whereas Instagram, you likely may not ever interact with these people. But I can confidently say that people I've connected with on LinkedIn have brought me real life opportunities or even friends, which has been amazing for my network.
That's great to hear. And I wonder if it's also has something to do with the fact that LinkedIn still feels a little bit more contained in terms of who's there, more
Mhm.
curated in
Yeah.
terms of who's participating and engaging on the platform.
Sure.
And you have to really be, it's harder, feel like, to be a bot on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about TikTok
Hmm.
because there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not TikTok's going to get banned.
Yeah.
How do you view TikTok? And secondly, do you think that companies should care about whether TikTok is banned?
So, how I view TikTok, to me, TikTok is like a secondary Google. It's funny because I've noticed that my search like nature has changed from like immediately going to Google versus immediately going to TikTok. I still use
Mhm.
both. But I grew up in the era where we used like Bing and Google for everything. And now I'm like, what's TikTok saying? Because I just feel like I get more realistic information based on what I'm finding, what I'm trying to find. So definitely a search engine for sure. I also use it as a marketer for a place to source creators and influencers. Like I think it's so I think it's so interesting because Instagram to me feels very curated and almost like fake in a little bit of a way. Where I find that TikTok is like where people really show us who they are. Like you'll was weirdness, their quirkiness, the things that make them
Mhm.
different. That's how you know
Mhm.
like getting the real person. So that's what I looked for. But in terms of whether businesses should care, I definitely think it's interesting because I think brands should care about social media in general and what's happening on there because I feel like it's a great hub for consumer insights. So definitely care in that sense. You may be losing a critical piece of like data and consumer insights that you can be using to fuel your business. But I think creators should especially care in the sense that if let's say you're a creator or influencer that has built your presence on TikTok and that's like where you have the majority of your presence, if TikTok goes away, what do you have? And that's why I really encourage a lot of creators and influencers to own their presence beyond social media because we're just living on borrowed time. These platforms can go off the window
Mhm.
at any moment. So it's like you need to have a website, you need to have a newsletter, you need to have in-person events and think like holistically beyond social because again, it's rented space. We don't know where it's going to be in the next couple of months or even a year.
Yeah. Well, I guess that leads me kind of to my next question for you, which is where do you see the whole creator economy or the influencer space
Mhm.
moving over the next like 12 months? I feel like it's so hard to even go beyond that, like to think beyond that. So much changes. But
Yeah.
where do you see things changing over the next 12 months?
So I have two kind of viewpoints. One, because I'm going to push my own agenda, I think a lot more influencers and creators are going to be navigating towards LinkedIn, especially for the B2B space. I think it's just a great opportunity for B2B brands, especially to amplify their own audience besides just like customer testimonials. Like you'll get real life influencers and creators who are actually using these softwares, products, talking about it to an audience that's actually relevant to them. Two, I think we're going to see, and we're already seeing it. I think a lot more influencers and creators are going to be moving in house at agencies and brands. I've worked
Mhm.
before, I worked as a full time senior content creator, where we're going to see creators and influencers on marketing teams serving as creative directors, where these brands like hire influencers to kind of lead their social campaigns. And I
Yeah.
said it's kind of retwisting the idea of like what a brand ambassador looks like, but facing it more so internally.
Yeah. So what is I just always want to like understand too from creators like yourself, what has been the campaign or the whatever you want to call it, the brand that you've gotten the chance to work on that has made you feel the best and why? Like what's your favorite campaign you had to work on and why?
So this is going to be a very random one. A couple of years ago, I was like in this hardcore travel era where I was just like every month I'm going somewhere. So I was
Oh
bopping
wow.
around. Yeah, I was bopping around the country, bopping around to other countries. I even did a brief stint in Italy for like 48 hours and I came right back. Like I was gone. And it was like the most fun I've ever had in my life. And at that
Mhm.
time, I was just creating content for the fun of it, not necessarily with brand partners in mind. And I think it's funny because I never once during that time said I'm a travel creator. I was just posting content for the fun of it. But I got one of my first brand partners, and it was with a museum in Mississippi. And they wanted me to travel to Mississippi to view their exhibit and I got paid to go to look at art, which is something I had already been doing while I was traveling. And it was so funny because I think like it wasn't this huge monumental partnership, but it definitely showed me that like when you post about the things that you enjoy doing, it can reward you in that type of way. So it's like I got a free trip, random place in Mississippi, was small and southern and country, but I loved it. And I had the best.
Yeah, it's a great example too of when creator influencer partnerships work
Yeah.
because it's organic. It feels very authentic, right? And that, I think that's the hardest part about being in this space is how do you match people, creators, the influencers with the campaigns so that it comes across and you can really get into content. And sometimes like when it doesn't feel like a good match,
Mhm.
it comes across so flat and it's kind of
Yeah.
uncomfortable to watch. So we've all seen that kind of content that you're like, oh, this doesn't work. My last question on this is, do you feel like that is something that's evolving in terms of how the creators are being picked or selected for campaigns so that it does have more of that? Do you think content's getting more authentic? I guess.
I definitely think content is becoming more authentic. And I feel like it's because people are becoming more comfortable being on social. And it's like putting yourself out there online in that way has become so normal that it almost requires a level of being yourself, being authentic, because it's so easy to debunk whether you're being inauthentic or not, you know?
Yeah.
People can feel it, people can sense it. And I think because of that, we're just getting to a place where we see content and it feels a lot more organic. It feels a lot more natural. Like one of the brands I even think about just because of, the mindset that someone might have or the idea of their brand positioning is the IRS. And when I see their Instagram account, it's so funny to me because I'm like, you guys post like a Gen Z brand, yet you are the IRS. You're a government agency.
I know
And
it's crazy.
yeah, and they post memes and it works and it's great and it keeps
Mhm.
people entertained and engaged. So to me, it's like even choosing channels, whether you're a brand or a creator, to figure out what that authentic brand is going to look like it's just a really great way to build that connection. And I love what I'm seeing.
I agree with you. And it's so interesting to see sort of more of the traditional stodgy type of brands like the Internal Revenue Service. I mean, how much stodgier can you get? That
No.
they are embracing social media.
Yeah.
Well, Jayde, I am so grateful for this time you've spent with us today. If people want to follow you, what's the best way for them to?
Yes, they can follow me at Jayde I Powell on all channels. And my name is spelled Jayde because the Y is fancy.
I can't wait to see all of the content that you are going to be continuing to put out. I know that it very much comes from a place of understanding what both the creator side of things, but also and what the audience wants. So I think to me, creators have such a good sense for what
Yeah,
their audience is looking for, but
for
also
sure.
you understand the brand side. So you've got the ingredients for long-term success, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm going to take that as manifestation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.